Hello, here are some examples from Chapter 3. First of all, the example we started the class with, all cats have 4 legs, Fluffy is a cat, therefore Fluffy has 4 legs. Now in asking whether or not this is a valid form of argument, the question isn't whether or not those statements are true or false, but whether the form itself is valid. In other words, if the first 2 statements are true, is the third statement, the conclusion, forced to be true? And in this case it is, and so it's a valid form of argument. It also happens to be true that all 3 of those statements are true. Now one way to tell that this is a valid form is to notice that it happens to match the direct syllogism form. All x's are y's, z is an x, therefore z is a y. Now we're asking about the form itself, not whether or not the statements are true or false. Here's another similar example. All dogs are mammals. Fluffy is a dog, therefore Fluffy is a mammal. Now notice that that second premise is false, but the statement, the last statement, the conclusion is still true. And in fact, the form has stayed the same. It's still the same direct syllogism, and so the form itself is still valid. It doesn't matter whether or not the statements are true or false. We're asking about the form itself. All Christians believe in God. DBC believes in God, therefore DBC is a Christian. Now is this a valid form of arguing? Well, it happens to be that all 3 statements are true, but that's not what we're asking. We're asking, is this form valid? Is the third statement forced to be true? And if you look in the list of syllogisms and fallacies, you'll discover that this is the converse fallacy. All x's are y's, z is a y, therefore z is an x. And so it's not a valid form of arguing, even though we got lucky in this case, and it turns out that the conclusion happens to be true. But if you think about it, you could change the statement without changing the form and end up with a false statement. All atheists believe in evolution. Dr. Jones believes in evolution, therefore Dr. Jones is an atheist. Now this is the same exact form as the previous one. In this case, we don't actually know whether or not the first 2 statements are true or false, but it doesn't matter. That's not what we're asking. Because it's the same form, it is also an invalid form of arguing, whether or not the statements are true or false. All Biola students are Christians. Yes, and that's a picture of a cross made out of American flags on Metzger lawn. So all Biola students are Christians. All Biola students are Republican. Therefore, all Christians are Republicans. Well, so first of all 3 of those statements are false. And this happens to match the coincidence fallacy. And so the premises are all x's are y's, all x's are z's, therefore all y's are z's. Well, that's a fallacy, and so this is an invalid form of arguing. And again, it doesn't matter whether or not the statements themselves are true or false, but the form is invalid.